Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our Dharma with streaming. And in today's sections, we are going to proceed to another truth, noble truth. So in the past few sessions, we have already discussed the three noble truths. The first is the suffering. The second is the cause of suffering. And the third is the end of suffering. And we already know what are the basic sufferings we have in our life. And we have to face them no matter what. So either we face it with courage, or we deny or avoid them. And like living in the dream. But when it is time to wake up, think about it. We might not be able to handle it. And we might do a lot of things that even bring to us more suffering to ourselves. So we understand the cause of suffering, that the cause that lead us to suffering. And also there's a chance to end the suffering. And now it is our choice whether we want to end the suffering, or we continue the suffering, or we add more suffering to ourselves. And we really have to think about it, is that, do we want to continue live like this? It is true that there are a lot of things we can't change in this world. We can't change the weather. We can't change ourselves from getting old. We can't stop sickness. Then in that case, is that how do we stop the suffering feeling? And within the Four Noble Truths, this is the guide to end the suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. The eight part of the path to liberation are grouped into three essential elements of the Buddhist practice. One is the moral conduct, the other one is the mental discipline, and the fourth is the wisdom. So there are 8 types of practice that we have, and it categorized into 3 elements: moral conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The Buddha taught the Eightfold Path in virtually all in his teachings, and his directions are very clear and practical too. He wants his followers to learn from him and also to practice it, because this is the path that leads us to the end of suffering, or cessation of suffering. So let's briefly talk about these 3 elements and the Eightfold Path, the 8 paths. The first category is the wisdom. And this wisdom includes the right understanding of feel, or right thoughts and intention. And we will talk about it today. The second is the moral conduct. And it involves the right speech, right action, and right livelihood, which we will discuss in the next class. And the last one is the mental discipline, which are the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So there are 8 paths. The first one is right understanding or view. The second is right thoughts or intention. The third is right speech. The fourth is right action. The fifth is right livelihood. The sixth is right effort. The seventh is right mindfulness. And the 8th is right concentration. And practically the whole teachings of the Buddha, he devote himself in the 45 years or 47 years of teaching, is to deal with our life and how we live our life. He explained it in different ways and in different words to different people, according to the stage of their development and their capacity to understand and learn from him. in all his teaching, is basically based on the Noble Eightfold Path and expand out in different ways of teachings to different people. So this is the reason why in Buddhism there are so many sutras, because there are so many different people in this world whereby the Buddha has to use his wisdom to apply the teaching as according to the needs of that particular person. And this is what we call the skillful means. So with all these teachings, which are the ones that can help us in our life? Think about it. It should not be taught that the 8 categories or divisions of the path should be followed and practiced one after the other in the numerical order as given in the usual list above. So some people say that, oh, should I practice the first one before I go to the second one? And then after that, then I go to the third one. It's not in this way. Basically, it has to be practiced together. Together, and also based on the condition at that time. So they are to be developed more or less simultaneously, as far as possible, according to the capacity of each individual. So again, it really depends on the person themselves to see how the practice should be applied to. But these are the 8 basic paths that in our life, when we practice it, this is something that can help us to cease our suffering. Because these 8-fold paths are all linked together and each helps the cultivation of the others. So when we practice the Eightfold Path, we have to practice it as according to the condition at that time, that person, capacity, and also that environment, and apply as accordingly. And this leads a lot of thinking and consideration. So these 8 factors or paths aim at promoting and perfecting the 3 essentials of the Buddhist training and discipline. As I mentioned earlier, they are the ethical conduct, mental disciplines, and wisdom. It will therefore be more helpful for a coherent and better understanding of the 8 paths if we group them and explain them according to these 3 elements. So these 3 elements basically is to help us to have a better understanding about the 8 type of path that we apply in our daily life when we do anything or make any decision. So now we are going to start with the first element or the first category, which is the wisdom. We start with the wisdom. So it's something related to our judgment, how we look at this world. In the wisdom, there are 2 paths. They are the right understanding or view, and the other one is the right thoughts or intention. So we start with the right understanding or view. In Chinese, called the 正知, right view. Before we talk about individual paths, I would like to introduce to you about the key words in this 8 paths, which is the right. What is the definition of right in Buddhism? How do we know that this is right? What does this right mean? So I'm not going to in-depth about the explanation, but I just give a basic guideline. This right is no matter what we think, what we do, what we talk in action or in speech or in thinking or making any decision, bring no harm to ourselves and other people. If there's a thinking that brings harm to ourselves or other people, then this is not right. If we have action bring benefit to ourselves but bring harm to other people, that's not right. If we have an action that bring benefit to other people and bring harm to ourselves, it depends on what is your intention. Maybe this action is to benefit a lot of people by sacrificing ourselves, and we are willing to do so. Then it's not a wrong thing, but it really depends on our own intention why we do this. So in general, right means no harm. It's just like the 5 precepts. Precepts, we call shila. In Sanskrit or Pali, shila means that no harm. No harm by killing. Don't kill other people. Don't bring harm to other people. So right means no harm. This thinking, this action, bring no harm. Then that is right. So right view is to have the right concept and right idea. One concept can change a person's life. The object of learning Buddhism and of cultivating ourselves is to correct our mistake that we make in our life and bad habitual intentions. We have a lot of habits might bring harm to ourselves and other people. So the objective of learning the Buddhism and cultivation ourselves is to transcend ourselves to the right path. This is why having the right view is so important in the Buddhist teaching. There are many interpretations and explanations of right view. According to the Lion Roar of Queen Srimala Sutra, right view are those views which are not subject to delusion or confusion. Which means that when we have this view, we look at things, it's not a misunderstanding or a confusion or dreaming of certain things. We look at things in its truth of that thing. So the truth of everything in this phenomenal world is impermanence. Unfortunately, we have this delusion that hoping that everything in us, around us, including ourselves, are permanent, no change. But this is a dream. This is a delusion. It will change. So if, when we look at things, we view things, we understand about the impermanence of this world, when we face with the impermanence, we know how to confront it, how to transcend ourselves. And the Flower Adornment Sutra says that as we develop right view, we moved further away from delusion. In a way, is that if we understand or have the right view in the things that we see, we touch, we feel, we understand the truth, basically we are getting further and further away from suffering. And according to the thesis on the perfection of great wisdom, right view is wisdom. It's a thinking, a thought that we are different from other people. We look even deeper and further and broader. We get more understanding about the reality, about the truth. So when we have this more understanding, we will have the wisdom to make the wise decision, whether we want to continue or accumulate more suffering, or we want to reduce the suffering. According to the introductions to the stage of entering the Dharma realm, if one can cultivate without outflow the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, one will see them clearly, and this is called the right view. What it means is that when we are cultivating, we are able to observe, understand the Four Noble Truths. We understand each suffering. We understand each cause this suffering. What caused all this suffering? We understand about that will be an end of this suffering. We know it. And we understand that we have a Buddha nature in us. We know very clearly, even though we are living in this challenge environment or situation, we know it. And we see it clearly, deeply. This is the right view. This is how we see things and how we understand the truth. And when we understand the truth and when we see the truth, we will have another mentality to face the reality. So in summary, right view encompasses observation that lead us away from delusion and wrong views. It is the wisdom that truly comprehends cause and effect. And this cause and effect is very important. Chinese call yin yuan. We have the wisdom to look into what will be the cause. What are the causes for this thing? And when we do any action, there will be an effect, whether it's a good effect or bad effect. It is the right understanding that results from contemplating phenomenal through the three Dhamma seal, the Four Noble Truths, and the 12 links of independent origination. We will have a better understanding about this phenomenal world, about ourselves, what are we facing, about why we keep on rebirth in this samsara world. And looking at it from a broader perspective, we can see that all truths of Buddhism are right view. All the teachings from the Buddha, what he introduced to us, are the reality of this world, of our life. It is just that we get confused. We denied it. We avoid it. And that's why it causes us to have a lot of suffering. And when we learn Buddhism, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to continue the suffering that we are facing right now? This is what the Buddha wants to tell us. Okay, this next path, which is called the right thoughts and right intentions. So in Chinese, it's called the 正见, right thoughts. Right thought is always known as right determination, right differentiation, right awareness, or right intention. The thesis on the stage of Yogacara practitioner says, when right view is strengthened, thoughts without anger, and harmfulness arises, this is right thoughts. Therefore, right thoughts means to not have thoughts of greed, anger, and ignorance. Instead, it is contemplating and distinguishing the true features of phenomenal with wisdom. So what does this mean? This means that when we have the right understanding and view of this reality in the world, in this phenomenal world and us, we will have the right thought, thinking, to make a decision on what we want to do or we do not want to do. We know about the truth. We know that what causes us to suffer. So we know about it and we understand it. We can see it, see the truth. Now is the time that we have to think about it and make a decision. What do we want to do? What is the intention for us to do? This intention, whether we want the sufferings to continue or we want to reduce the suffering. So the more we have the right view, the more we know what decision we make. And we will think about it is that, do we want to continue to get angry and harm ourselves or other people? Do we want it? Will this bring us happiness? Do we want to continue our habit of greedy, anger, ignorance? Do we want it? Do we want this habit in us to continue and bring more unhappiness to us? Bring more loneliness, fear to us? Of course, everybody has their own choice of life. They can choose what they want. They can choose to continue suffer. They can choose to increase more suffering. At the same time, they can also choose to reduce the suffering. We always say that in Buddhism, we always say that there are 3 poisons in the sentient beings, in all of us. One is the greed. We have the desire. We have the desire, we have the craving. We keep on wanting a lot of things. The greediness. We have anger, the habit of anger. We easily get frustrated. We are impatient. We're not happy. Easily get angry. And ignorance. We're always dreaming. Dreaming. We always think that things supposed to be there. This thing supposed to belong to me. Even my body supposed to belong to me. We thought this is the truth. We dream. We are not living in the reality. And all this actually binds us and keep us from seeking the way to reduce or end the suffering. At any given moment, these 3 poisons occupy our mind and pollute the purity of our Buddha nature. Because of this habit, we are fully occupied by it. Our mind are full of a lot of negative thinking, a lot of dreams. And when we wake up, we realize that this is just a dream and we get so lost. We get fear. All this loss and fear and anger and greediness cover our Buddha nature, our purity in us. And if we wish to live behind these 3 poisons, we must be firm in our resolve. We must always contemplate the right Dharma. So again, this is the choice of life. When we know ourselves better, we know what are our weakness or what caused us to suffer or keep on rebirth. Then we ask ourselves, do we want to continue? And if we choose the path of, I want to stop this suffering, or I want to reduce the suffering in my life, then we start the path of cultivation in the Dharma. But before we start the path, we must make a promise to ourselves. We must be firm in the decision we make. We make a decision that I want to reduce the suffering. I make a promise to myself. So I need to keep the promise. I want to resolve this suffering. So no matter what challenge comes to me, I won't easily give up. I make a promise. In Buddhism, we call it, we make a vow. And how do we start this path of cessation of the suffering? We must always contemplate the right Dharma. And you will say, what is the right Dharma? The right Dharma is the Three Dharma Seal, which we will very soon discuss in our class. So every moment, every minute, every second, no matter whether we are sleeping or working or even watching TV, we must always have this Dharma in us. When there's something which is unwholesome or a negative thing arises, we are not easily influenced by this negative information because we have this right view in us, whereby this view leads us to think. And when we think, if we think in the right way, then we will have the right intention to make a decision. What do we do next? So we must possess the mind of gentleness, compassion, and purity, and free from anger. So this is very important. If we have the mind always in the negative thinking, we won't bring in the positive energy because our whole body are filled with the negative energy. We can't fill up any positive thinking in us. And this negative energy are the greed, anger, and ignorance. So how do we reduce this greed, anger, and ignorance? How do we reduce it? We reduce it by contemplating in a kind way, in a kind thinking, in a compassion thinking, in the nice and purified thinking, and also not to arise any anger. Don't arise any frustration or impatience. When our thoughts are in according with the right Dharma at every moment, we can eliminate the three poisons and grow closer to becoming the Buddha or Bodhisattva. Or we get closer to us to be a happy person. This is something that we really have to think about. That what are we thinking? Are we thinking in a right view? Right understanding? If we see things in an unwholesome way, in a unkind or negative mentality, of course, we will have this negative effect, cause and effect. Always remember that we are the one that creates the cause. And that's why after this cause will have an effect. So what effect do we want? You want a good effect or a negative effect? When we see things, do you see the reality, the truth of everything? We already talked about a lot about what is truth. The truth is impermanence and non-self. Everything change. Everything caused by cause and effect. This is the reality. This is the truth. Can we see it? Can we see it? And we already know that the cause of our suffering is because of our delusion and confusion. And also because of the three poison in us, in our habit. And these three poison are the greed, anger, and ignorance in us. We crave for a lot of things. We want to have a lot of things in our life. We want to have love. We want to have people to comfort us. We want to have a lot of material things. We like to have fame. We like to have respect. We're craving for respect. And when we don't get what we crave for, we get angry. We get impatient, frustration. And this brings us to anxiety and stress and also depression. And why do we have all this? Because we are ignorant. Ignorance means we don't see the truth. We only see things in our knowledge, what we learn in the school, what we learn from our parents. This is called knowledge. This is not wisdom or the truth. We have the knowledge in a lot of things, but can this knowledge help us to reduce suffering? Can we? Can this knowledge help us? So when we learn Buddhism, Buddhism is not just a knowledge. Buddhism is about how we live our life. And the Buddha taught us is that start with the right understanding or view in this phenomenal world. Start with that. Look into the truth. Look into the reality. And look into our habitual tendency, our true self. There's a true self in us. There's a non-true self is with us. The true self is the Buddha nature. Unfortunately, we are being covered by our untrue self, which is the habit, or which are the habits. All these habits cover, push down our true Buddha nature. And when we cultivate the right understanding or view, then the next thing is that we have to think in the right way, have the right awareness and right intention. We are aware of it, and then when we make a decision, we do a decision in a right intention. And the base for this right thoughts or intention is the right understanding and view. And How do we do that? We have to contemplate every moment, every second in the right Dharma, which are the impermanence and non-self. At the same time, we have to possess the mind of gentleness, compassion, and purity. And most important, free from our greed, anger, and ignorance. In order for us to make a decision in doing the right things. And this would distinguish the unwholesome thoughts and intentions. And it will help us to reduce suffering. So when we reduce suffering, basically we are getting closer and closer to the shore of liberation. So in today's class, we talk about the Eightfold Path, and I would like to briefly go through again about the basic thinking of this Eightfold Path. And in Buddhism, we categorize this Eightfold Path into the essential three elements. They are the moral ethics, mental discipline, and wisdom. And we start the Eightfold Path, we start with the wisdom first, which are the right understanding or view, and right thoughts or intention, which we already talked about it today. And next week, we will talk about the moral conduct, which involves the right speech, right action, and right livelihood. The last one will be the mental discipline, which are the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And that's something that we need to emphasize is that this Noble Eightfold Path is not practiced in sequence. It's supposed to practice simultaneously. Means that you have to practice them together as according to the capacity of individual. They are all linked together and each helps the cultivation of the others. So when we practice this Eightfold Path, we have to practice it together, not one after another. And today we talk about the right understanding. The right understanding or view is to have the right concept and right ideas. It is to help us to cultivate ourselves to the correct mistakes and bad habit tendency, to stop it. And this is why having the right view is very important in the Buddhist practice or the Buddhist teaching. So when in the sutra, we talk about the right view are those views which are not subject to delusion or confusion. And the right view compresses observation that leads us away from delusion and wrong view. We emphasize a few times that delusion and wrong view. It shows us that a lot of times when we see things, we are seeing things in a delusion way. So the wisdom, this wisdom is the truth, comprehends the cause and effect. And it is the right understanding that results from contemplating phenomena through the three Dhamma seal, the Four Noble Truths, and the 12 links of dependent origination. The next is the right thoughts or intention. So the right thoughts or intention is also known as right determination, right differentiation, and right awareness. This means that when right view is strengthened, thought without anger and harmfulness arises. This is right thoughts. So when we have any thinkings that ties with anger and harmfulness, this is not the right thoughts. And right thoughts means to not have thoughts of greed, anger, and ignorance. It is to help us, it is something that's supposed to help us to cease the suffering, bring no harm to anyone, including ourselves. So this is the right thoughts and intention. And next week, we will talk about the ethical conduct. This ethical conduct is physically, how do we practice in our actions, our physical body, of course, including our mind. So we end this session today, and I will see you next week. A弥陀佛.